Hi, and welcome to the third webinar in our Positive Safety series, moving beyond the sugar hit and SME's perspective on sustaining change. It's awesome to be here with you all today and also to have Ben Carnell, our Head of Client Solutions, and Dr. Vanessa Cook, our Head of Positive Safety, joining for the conversation. Hi, Ben, and hi, V.
Hello.
Thanks, Ian. Hi, everyone.
So we'll launch into the meaty stuff in just a moment, but it's always good to stop and pause as we join these events and take a bit of a moment to acknowledge the country on which all of us are working and living. So SENTIS acknowledges the traditional custodians throughout Australia and recognises their connections to land, waters and community. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay our respects to elders past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here online today, and we do this because we value Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history, culture, and knowledge. And again, our commitment to this and our land is significant here at SENTIS with our conservation work that we're doing down in the Pillar Valley, where we've got about 465 hectares of land that we're working in collaboration with the local Indigenous community to restore to its former glory after it's been, I guess, harvested of a lot of its timbers and it's got a lot of weeds and other infestations in there. So that's a lot of the philanthropic work we're able to contribute to at SENTIS. For any of you who are not familiar with SENTIS, and even those who are, our mission is to change the lives of individuals and organisations for the better every day. We do that through the application of psychology and neuroscience to create safer workplaces, build leadership capability, and help bring a lot of, I guess, existing safety systems and processes to life within the organisations that we partner with. So a lot of today is actually going to talk about how we do that work and our learnings that we've been able to gather across a significant period of time working with a number of different organisations. So I'll throw to V. How are we going to tackle today's session?
Sure. So today we're discussing moving beyond the sugar hit and SME's perspective on sustaining change. And we're focusing on this topic because, as many of us know, driving effective change and lasting change, especially when it comes to culture, is one of the most challenging endeavours an organisation can undertake. Now, Anthony and Ben, I believe you bring over 25 years of combined experience in helping organisations across all sorts of sizes and industries to achieve meaningful, sustainable transformations. So this is a really good opportunity to tap into your expertise and hear some real-world insights into what works and why. So I'm going to introduce the SENTIS Way, the model on the screen. So this is our evidence-based framework designed to guide organisations through effectively managing change. And then, gentlemen, I'd love you to demonstrate how each phase can be actioned by talking us through some client examples. So the SENTIS Way provides a structured approach to planning and implementing change thoughtfully and systematically. And essentially what you're seeing here is a recipe for predictable, repeatable and sustainable change. And something to note here is that this is not a linear model or a numbered model. So we use this to meet clients where they're at in their change journey and to ask the right questions to identify what's needed to achieve the outcomes they want. So if we move into unpacking each step there. So the first step here, understand. Here we want to ensure that we're drawing attention to the right issues at the right time. So some of the questions we might ask are, have we determined what's driving our safety data? Do we understand the underlying story? And do we know exactly where to focus? In the align phase, we want to ensure that people are energised and travelling in the same direction. So do we have a vision that informs our strategy? Do we have buy-in across the business? And how can we ensure that our initiatives are going to cut through? In the prepare phase, we want a fit-for-purpose solution that is developed to address the objectives. So here you might consider what's going to get in the way and have we got a plan for that? And looking ahead, how do we ensure that we'll integrate the changes that we make? In the next phase, implement, This is where the change or training or process improvement is hitting the mark and that it's being received positively. So are you gaining feedback along the way and sharing that feedback? And are you able to make pivots or changes if needed? In the integrate phase, this is really important. We want to ensure that the change isn't lost over time and that improvements are maintained and have become a part of the way that work is done. So what do we need to do in order to weave this into the fabric of our organisation? How do we build accountability, ensure that change is led with authenticity? And then finally, in evaluate, this is where we want to ensure that we're evaluating the return on investment. Do we understand the impact of the work that we've put in? What can we learn from the initiative? Where are we? And what's our next step? So that's the Centre Sway in a nutshell. I want to bring this to life though by unpacking what it looks like when clients action each of these phases. So, let's start with the understand phase. If you go on to the next slide, thank you. This is obviously a really important step here. Could you help us bring this to life with a client example of why this is an important phase and what it looks like when an organisation does this well?
Yeah, absolutely, V. Look, and just a little bit of context on this model. We first put this model together about 10 years ago, and it's evolved a few times since then. And it came from the question of going back and looking at the work that we've partnered with organisations on, going, all right, well, what projects worked and what projects maybe didn't go to plan as well. And we were able to find that there were some pretty significant trends in terms of, ticking off key actions that meant that certain projects were more successful than others. So we use this model in our own head when we're working with organisations to ensure that we're sort of coaching and guiding and thinking through, I guess, the different considerations that we can, think about to ensure that we're supporting our organisations set up for success. As V mentioned, different organisations will work with us at different stages of the process, and we might not actually complete each stage of the process with an organisation, but having this model is useful for us to ensure that we're nudging and guiding and prodding at the right points in time. So as you mentioned, V, getting a good understanding of the job to be done or the problem to be solved is really, really key. And I love this quote from Stephen Covey where it says, "Seek to understand before, then to be understood." And I think why this is so important is that often when organizations get to the point where they feel like they need to undergo some sort of change process, the frustration is at a certain point. It's at a point where why won't they do what they're supposed to do is a lot of the sort of language and comments that we hear coming out of organizations as they work with us. And, a lot of the frustration is, well, we can understand it, we empathize with it. But what we will often find is that because that frustration activates our primitive brain in nearly a fight or flight sort of response, we kind of have a theory about what the issue is or the driver of the particular issue is, and then that sort of clouds our focus on everything. All roads lead back to the same particular outcome, and often all roads lead back to individual decisions and individual choices, and that often plays out in terms of what we see from incident investigations or reports and all those sorts of things. So what we really encourage organizations to think about is, people might be making choices that aren't ideal, but is there other stuff that might also be going on that could be contributing to that particular outcome? So we really encourage organizations, whether it's with us or through their own investigations, to sort of slow down and explore with curiosity what's actually going on here and what are some of the assumptions that we're making that may not be helpful in us guiding a great process. What we find is if we're able to slow down and really seek to understand and consult with our workforce just through the process of consultation and truly hearing and listening, that starts to build the trust and starts to build support for buy-in. And then what starts to then happen is, as we get that information, you see light bulbs start to pop on. Oh, we didn't realize that the safety experience at the front line was like that. We didn't realize that, that particular process was perceived in that way. A good example that I've sort of identified recently with another organization is in the review of their personal risk assessment tool, the major commentary that's come out of the workforce in the consultation is the risk assessment tool won't save your job, but it will won't save your life, but it might save your job. So like the whole thing was perceived as a butt covering exercise through the process. So it starts to illuminate what the frontline experience is like. And what it also enables us to do is get a high quality data that supports the next stage of the process, which is align. Now, if I move to the next slide, and we've shared a little bit of Unity Water's data in the past, but this is a good opportunity to reflect back to that. When I first sat down with Keenan and the leadership team there, and they got these results back all those years ago, by getting this data, it became really clear. They went, oh, okay, so if we look at those red dots, like external context, so the way we manage external influence into the business, the way we create and promote hazard awareness and control, the way we communicate internal context, which is change management, clarity of vision, while we're making decisions. And if we up the quality of our training development, if we move those dots, you're saying that we can move the dial. And we're saying, yeah, absolutely. And they zeroed in on those. And that set up for the next stage, a really great conversation around, well, if we know that we need to, if they're the 4 jobs to be done, how do we address those particular challenges? And that fed into the align session. In the align session, this process of align is about getting everyone singing off the same song sheet. So often one of the big challenges that we face, or organizations face in change, is a whole lot of people bringing different perspectives and different viewpoints as to, well, what is the actual problem to solve? And again, I love this Albert Einstein quote: if I had now solved a problem, I spent 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solutions. And it's quite remarkable when you actually have a clear idea about the job to be done, the focus it'll create within a team to be able to solve that problem. So what we encourage organizations to really do at this particular point in time is to plan for that change in a way that you plan for other aspects of your business. Actually set key activities, accountabilities, and responsibilities, and map out on a quarter-to-quarter basis the jobs to be done to shift the dial. And again, Unity Water and a number of our partner organizations went through a process like this, and the result can be, of that deliberate and intentional focus and designing what we want to achieve, is you move the dial quite significantly and quite quickly. You can see those red dots move to yellow and grey, and by moving those dots, they're able to significantly reduce their risk exposure. So you can see here some of those on the right-hand side, the reduction in injury frequency rates, increase in the misreporting, increase in SIF, decrease in SIF exposure. And I was just chatting with Keenan only this week. A lot of those metrics have continued to trend in the right direction, although, some of them are. So, the opportunity now is to regroup and go, all right, well, certain things are working. There's a couple of things that aren't working. What do we need to do next? And I think that's kind of, it feeds into this cyclical process that we go to, which is where, preparing and implementing, I think the next stage become a thoughtful consideration if you want to sustain and continue a change. Yeah.
That's right. And, I think it's so easy to want to jump into the action phase. That's something that most of us human beings want to do. We want to get right into the change, but we've got to set it up well. So those first two phases of understand and align, ensure that we've really pinpointed where we need to focus and we've got that buy-in. Interestingly, the research says that 70% of change initiatives fail because people are not on the bus. We don't have shared alignment. I believe even it was Rod Maul from Australia Post in our book. He actually said something like that it doesn't matter how good your strategy or initiative is, if you haven't got alignment and people on the bus, then it's going to fail. So that first part is really getting a great, strong setup, getting alignment and shared buy-in. And then we can have a good setup for the next two phases, prepare and implement. So Ben, prepare phase is about creating a solid plan of the solution that incorporates the strategy, builds excitement and reduces resistance along the way. And the implement phase is where we get to actually roll out. We love to do the doing, right? We actually roll out the change, the training, whatever it might be. Can you share some client examples of what this looks like when done well?
Yeah, thanks, V, and hello, everyone. The prepare phase, and Ant's made some really good comments there, and particularly in that understanding that aligning phase is it's often, to be probably quite, sort of succinct here, is it's often the organisations that invest in those phases are really, it's the difference between those organisations that want to make the meaningful difference versus those that want to be looking like they're making meaningful difference in those areas. So really investing that time up front to look at, okay, what does it look like for us to look at what dials we need to turn most that's going to have the most significant impact on shifting it is whatever it is that we want to achieve, and usually sort of safety culture when we're talking about this context. So the prepare phase is really about, okay, we've got the data, we've aligned on what the problem is, and we've started to formulate and align on what a solution is looking like. The prepare phase is really about looking at what does it look like to have a clear story, a clear vision, and how that's communicated to the organisation about what we're going to go about achieving. That's one part of it. The other part is to make sure that whatever is then done at the implementation phase and beyond then anchors to that vision, that story really, really clearly as well, and people are able to draw those links. So there's a few things that we see organisations do well, and certainly we recommend at the prepare phase. The prepare phase, and I like that. I like that language of prepare versus plan. In that prepare, and I was looking at something only earlier this week actually, that preparing for something allows you to control for or allows you to be in a place to respond to the uncontrollables, whereas a plan typically focuses on the controllables. Now, when we're talking about culture change, we're talking about organisational shifts, there's going to be a lot of uncontrollables. There's going to be a lot of things that pop up that perhaps might not have been expected. And so spending time in this prepare phase allows an organisation to be able to adapt to those things without it derailing or stopping or halting, what their journey might look like as well. So a couple of things in the prepare phase that are really, really, really important. The first one is looking at what's the story or what's the vision of what you're trying to achieve with this journey that you're about to embark on. And namely, a lot of the organisations we work with, achieving a culture of positive safety is the journey or the vision that they're trying to achieve. And so looking at, well, what does that mean for us as an organisation? What's the language? What's the picture of what good looks like in XYZ period of time? And then what's the story that we put around that and how that's then communicated to the organisation? One of the steps that's often missed is being able to, is making sure an organisation anchors the things that they're going to do back to what it is that they're trying to achieve or the outcome that they're trying to achieve. That makes it, that's a really critical step within that journey as well. So we get the data, we've aligned on that. What's our vision? What do we want to achieve? And what's the story we want to put around that? Why are we trying to achieve this? What's it going to look like? And then what are the critical things that are going to support that journey as well? So out of that data, there might be 200 things an organisation could go and target, really looking at what are the half a dozen or so areas that we want to target, the dials that we want to turn up and down the most, that's going to have the most significant impact on us achieving that vision that we've communicated to the organisation. So getting a really clear story around what you want to achieve. The second part is looking at whatever you're going to do in the implement part, is that is contextualized to the organizational context, but also around that vision that you do want to achieve. So what does it look like, rather than just rolling out a program off the shelf, what does it look like to contextualize that program so it feels more like the organization's program and part of their journey rather than an off-the-shelf program from an external provider? What does it look like to incorporate some of your operating rhythms into that program as well? What does it look like, as an example, to talk to your values in a training program? Or what does it look like to start to grab some of that data and start to incorporate and shift the way that you do things within your operating context as well? The other part that's really critical in that prepare phase is starting to socialize and talk to, start to tell the story around what it is that's coming. And that becomes a really critical part as well. Is often we see organizations, a training program might be part of the solution, and they'll roll out a training program and there might be an email communication at best around what this training program is. And inevitably you rock up at the training program to deliver it. People don't know why they're there. They don't know how the training fits into the broader piece of what they're trying to achieve. So making sure that training is, or whatever it might be, is really clearly communicated around how it's going to support the vision and the journey that you're on as well. Now, where we've seen organizations do this well is certainly, different communication channels that they have is building some excitement, is your communication that comes from ideally the executive down in terms of this journey that the organization is about to embark on, and building some excitement around what that's going to look like as well. Communication can also take the form of consultation. So we're about to embark on this program. What sorts of things can you see? Running pilots. What sort of things would you like to see? Included in a program like this, and starting to involve people in the design of that program and get their buy-in to what it's going to look like as well. So that prepare phase, again, those few key things of making sure that we've outlined a really clear story and a vision of what we want to achieve, that we've contextualized what it is that we're going to do to the organization and to the vision, and that we're communicating really clearly around why we're about to embark on and what it's going to look like as well. We know that people crave certainty. Then we jump into the implement phase, and the implement phase, a little bit to V's point earlier on, that is the fun part. It's where all the action happens, and this is looking at what might a training program look like to deliver as part of the solution, and probably to that point that training's not the answer to all of the opportunities that the data might highlight, but it's often part of the solution in conjunction with other things. So looking at how do we get the timing right? How do we have a clear, rollout plan for when we're going to roll out training, and how does that align to the other initiatives or other things that we might be doing? So as an example, if incident reporting is a real opportunity area within the diagnostic results, is looking at, well, we're going to, in a training program, look to upskill and start to shift some of the frames that exist around incident reporting. But there's also data that suggests that the reporting process is also really difficult, is making sure that, okay, well, we need to upskill people in it and shift some of the thinking, but we also need to shift what that process looks like as well. So making sure that we're doing them probably in conjunction with each other, if not reviewing the process and changing the process just before people go through the training program as well. And what you're doing in starting to look at how those different pieces fit together is you're starting to remove some of the objections that might exist typically in a training program, and you'll hear all the ifs and buts and those sorts of things that will come through a training program. The other thing that it also does is it provides a really good anchor point for, particularly for us as facilitating these programs, for the conversations in those programs, for people to see where the organization is starting to make some traction. So hugely powerful. If I grab that example, we're delivering a program, people say, oh, that the organization doesn't care about our safety, it's just a behind covering exercise, the process is really clunky to report. And we're able to then in the program start to shift some of that thinking, but to also say, hey, the work that your organization has done in the last few months to change and review that process, that's come out of the data and a reflection of the journey that they're on. And all of a sudden people start to see, oh, okay, maybe this isn't just a fad of the month. This isn't just another training program. Maybe the organization is quite keen on seeing some meaningful impact back in our operating rhythms as well. So that's rollout plan around all the different things that need to be done, and the training as part of the solution. Having really careful thought around how those different things fit together becomes really critical.
Great, Ben. So how does this play out for some of the organisations?
Yeah, so let's take this this example here. So this is an example of a recent client data, and to their credit, and we'll touch on this in a moment, is tracking data or capturing data on a regular point becomes really critical to adjusting what that journey looks like. But here we have an organisation that started with recognised that they collected some data and they did some strategy planning, and as part of that recognised that they needed to shift and build their safety leadership capability amongst their leaders. So what they went about doing is undertaking a program and rolling that out to all of their leaders, and that was quite an extensive program that was deployed out to all of their leadership group. Few things that they did really well along that journey. The first part is taking the time to really consult with their workforce and talk about the program that was coming up. The executives first went through that program, and then they were then in a position to talk to their leaders about the program that was coming up, what they're going to get out of it, how it attaches to their journey and what they are trying to achieve in the long term, and what that strategy is going to look like. And that started to build maybe some excitement, but certainly some interest in what it was going to look like. And then people went through the program, and that program wasn't heavily customized. And I think that can sometimes be a risk for some organizations, is they over customize a program to try and make it very prescriptive, and it doesn't allow the flexibility for people to go through that journey themselves. But they contextualized some of that program delivery in terms of how it was delivered and what the facilitators were delivering to, in light of what some of the data was alluding to and some of the operating context. People went through that program, generated some excitement. What that then did is then actually create an environment where those leaders recognized that their teams needed to go through a program if they were to be singing from the same songbook. So the leaders then advocated for that, and that was then the journey that the rest of their organization went on. But what they also did alongside that is started to target other things that were coming through in their diagnostic results. So critical risk management was a huge opportunity for them. And so they started to shift what critical risk management looked like internally within their organization, and started to equip that space or build that space that was better suited to what their operating context looked like. And then they went on the journey, once they had made those changes from a process point of view, is then taking their leaders through further training around what critical risk management looks like as well. Again, providing a perfect example of, let's change the environment and then let's upskill people to operate within that environment as well. A key part, and this is often described as part of the embedding or part of sustaining change, it's actually part of the implementation, is they then took their leaders through coaching and were quite extensive in that coaching. At times that was anchored around critical risk management or critical control verifications. At times it was broader safety leadership, small group, individual coaching and the like, and really supporting leaders and off the back of the program data, actually supporting leaders to have the capability and confidence to take the training program and apply it back to their operating context with their individual leadership challenges as well. They've kept the language, they've kept the concepts at the forefront of their mind, and you can see the change that they've been in a fortunate position, not without a lot of work, to celebrate just earlier this year in terms of the shift they've made in the safety leadership space as well. You can also see the shift in some of the communication results as well, and we'll touch on that in a moment, in looking at grabbing tools and concepts from a program and building that into some of their operating rhythms that they have within their organization just as much as well.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Ben.
So it's really interesting. You can see that we need to set up the change or transformation really well and strongly. Then we need to prepare the workforce for the coming change. We implement it, but that's not the end of the journey. And just as Justin points out, he says one of our challenges is that when momentum slows and people try to slip back to the old culture and ways. So the next phase, integrate, is just so important. We need to ensure that the change is really established, owned, and becomes part of the fabric of the organization. So, Ant and Ben, I'd love you to share what good looks like in this space.
Yeah, V. So again, I love my quotes. This is one from James Clear from Atomic Habits, great book for anyone that's looking to promote and sustain long-term cultural change. Yeah, and what he says is success is a product of daily habits, not a once-in-a-lifetime transformation. I think that's really important to consider when we're talking about these sorts of change projects. It can be very easy, as Lowell has mentioned on the screen here, to roll something out, get some change, the heat goes out of the fire, and then slowly we regress back to where we were originally at the start of the process. So organisations who are most effective in this space actually plan for the integrate phase right at the very start of the rollout. So in the align and prepare phase, they're thinking about in 2, 3, 4 years' time, what do we want this thing to look like and how are we going to make it sticky? And that will often look like engaging boards, looking at reporting metrics that keep leadership teams accountable, and thinking about things like sustainment and buy-in and evolution of the work that we're doing. Now, an organisation that I think, or a team and an organisation that's approached this really thoughtfully, has been the crew out at Hay Point Coal Terminal. So work with them quite extensively. They've developed a custom program that aligns and integrates with their BHP operating system, and it supports their operational excellence system and supports safety culture. They planned right from the get-go that they wanted to build internal capability. So part of that process was selecting people that were called enablers, and they actually co-facilitated the team's rollouts work, and then partnered with us to then build a bunch of reinforcement and deployment kits, as well as a range of other elements as well. So this is, I guess, an example of some of the embedding activities that they've committed to. Very carefully, they planned out a deployment and sustainability strategy where they said, all right, well, we're going to deploy and reinforce this concept on this month. And they worked really, really closely with those enablers, and they keep rolling that through. So, you know, this is just one example of the work that they're doing. But what it means is that it isn't a sugar hit because it's language and concepts and ideas that are spoken about regularly through the meeting rhythms and processes and systems that they've got in place. And it's done by them. Yeah, we provide a bit of support, but really there's a strong sense of ownership of the work done by the enablers. So I guess what that sort of feeds into, I'm going to throw to Ben in just a second, is, you know, and again, another great book for anyone that's looking to do this work, a book called Nudge. Yeah, and basically in Nudge, they talk about this concept of choice architecture. So how do we design systems and processes that don't stop people doing things, but enhance the likelihood of them engaging in positive behaviors? And a lot of the things that we often expect from people, we expect they're going to do organically, but and through their own self-discipline. But if you think about self-discipline as being a bit like a muscle, self-discipline is something that if we wholly and solely rely on it, needs to be built up over time. And not everyone has the same level of self-discipline muscle. But also the thing with the self-discipline is if it's like a muscle, it fatigues. So if we're relying purely on people doing things through their own self-discipline, eventually they're likely to fatigue and revert back to kind. So ways that we can support that muscle and help them build that muscle are really crucial if we want to take something from being a conscious effort requiring kind of activity to a positive habit. And yeah, it's once we hit positive habits that we're starting to see that culture really shift and that positive momentum starting to build. So Ben, I'll throw to you for one of the things that we use to support those positive habits.
Yeah, so part of this nudging process is the programs, the organisations that we work with, and there's a whole heap of different versions of programs that an organisation might go to. One of the objectives among many of those programs is to instill a language with which we talk about safety, and to make that language easy to use, to make it compelling to use, and to make it available so that the conversations we have around safety happen easier, and so that people are engaging in those conversations more and more. Part of the challenge we'll see a lot of organizations go through is they'll go through the program, everyone has a great time, got the postcard, pat on the back, fantastic, but then there's not the purposeful and deliberate effort to actually look at incorporating that language or that way of thinking or those concepts or those tools into our daily operating rhythms. And so part of this integrate phase is the planning group or the preparing group being really deliberate around looking at what are the opportunities that we have across our organization to integrate some of that thinking, to integrate some of that language, some of those tools and concepts into how we go about getting work done. And this is not necessarily about finding new things or creating new things. It's looking at what is already in place and how can we start to shift the way that gets done to support the integration of the program concept, but to actually add more value to what those forums might look like. So what you've got here on the screen is an example of a shift deployment board or a pre-start board or GCOMS board. Different organizations will have different versions. But an example of what an organization has done to actually grab some of the program concepts and include them in that Safe Days board or shift deployment board in order to invite a conversation. So if we grab an example here, let's grab, let's start with perhaps the recognition piece. Now, recognition's one of the concepts. I'm talking about effective recognition in the leadership program is we might look at an organization here through when they come together in the morning to talk through, the day prior and the day ahead, is that there might have been no deliberate purpose in talking or recognizing what went well yesterday and what contributed to that. So in this shift deployment board, they've been very deliberate and purposeful in incorporating that into the conversation that will happen each morning. And so you start to build this focus on looking at the things that that are going well and starting to create this culture of catching people doing the right thing. Likewise, we're shifting some of the language, down below, we're talking about what's my 50% and starting to look at, well, if this is what we want to achieve today and we want to go home to our PB5, what role do we all play in that? And all of a sudden, you're facilitating a conversation that is going to happen anyway, but now you're being really deliberate in what the focus of that conversation is and how people are engaging in that conversation as well. It's a part that I know I get quite passionate about. I know Ant and V do as well, is the program's all well and good, but what does it look like to integrate that language and those concepts into the way things get done? Some brilliant examples, if I'm to share a few here, is being up at a mine site that we worked with for quite a while in a regional town in Queensland, in a very mining centric town, and had been there all week doing some coaching with their leaders. And I remember going to actually just a fast food restaurant, a healthy fast food restaurant-ish, and ordering a bit of dinner on the Friday night and making general conversation with the person behind the counter. And, how's your day been? And they said, oh, it's been really busy because it's a PB5 day today. And I thought, we haven't worked with that fast food chain at all. And I thought, that's really interesting that person knew what PB5 is. And started to unpack it a little bit and certainly talk with our stakeholders that it actually changed their RDOs to being PB5 days. And the focus around those days had just shifted just a little bit. And so now it wasn't just a day off. It was actually a day where people get to invest in the things that are most important to them. And now it provides an anchor point for why we're being safe this week. Got your PB5 day coming up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This organisation also, we're talking the middle of the outback here, and on the front of that site, big billboard, sort of, 2 by 4 meters of just a picture of a gorilla. Now, a gorilla is one of the concepts out of the program. Now, I knew what that was, but I look at all the contractors and all the visitors, perhaps the new starters coming to that site, and they rock up to a site in the middle of the outback and there's a picture of a gorilla sitting on a billboard, and that's all. And all of a sudden, you've got people on site going, hey, mate, what's the picture of the gorilla out the front for? And now you've got people talking about a gorilla representing the hazards that we can miss. Now, all of a sudden, you've got people talking about hazards and hazard ID at a high level, but in a way that's being built organically rather than forcing people to, go about a hazard ID process. So all those things in isolation don't shift the culture, but the accumulation of those things, and hence the concept of nudge, start to give, I think, people a few things. One is the confidence that the organisation is taking this seriously and that they can use the concepts, and that when they talk about gorillas or PB5 as a way to talk about safety, is that they're not sticking their neck out, that the organisation actually wants them to use those concepts and language. Two, it also serves as a refresher, because now people are going, oh, what was that concept? And now they're starting to go, oh, that's right. And they're starting to think about those things on a more regular basis. And the other part is it gives the opportunity for people to apply that in their workforces as well. So you think about a leader, who might be facilitating this process here, is it's a very purposeful and structured process that's designed with the brain in mind and designed to engage people properly in those conversations about safety, rather than it being just a tick box, shift deployment meeting as well. So you can't really overdo this part. And this is not trying to, reinvent the wheel, as it's really looking at what are the things that we already do, and how do we redesign or restructure those to add more value in terms of what it looks like.
Just a second screen here, Ben, where they were obviously using the board at this particular site to create great accountability and follow through on incident management and hazard management, and it worked quite well from our experience. So you're right. I think looking at existing systems and processes and not looking to add extra work to leaders or team members loads, but instead looking at, well, how do we create value in those particular areas? And one of the comments I saw in the chat come up there, Ben, was about the value of consultation and engaging the end user in I guess the work or the decisions that impacted on them. Certainly, I've had a few great experiences recently of that. Have you seen some good examples of that?
Yeah, I think to your earlier point, Ant, is looking at those integration points within those different meetings and those different rhythms becomes really critical. I'm trying to think. The examples I shared before are probably the examples I often share, because the organisation did it, and their results sort of speak for themselves in terms of what they have created. I think a big part that sits within this is the role that leaders play in driving what these processes look like. So you can have a shift deployment board, and here it's about sort of looking at the accountability part, but making sure that leaders get actively involved in what that looks like as well. And this may, I use for an example one organisation that we work with actually, where for them to come together and talk about, to go through a process like that was a difficult process. So, for them it was, putting some of these concepts, almost on a magnet board in essence, that then just gets stuck on the Hilux when they're out there in field, and we're having a conversation just gathered around the Hilux, just talking about some of these concepts and having some of that language, and that's not trying to reinvent the wheel. I don't think that's just going, hey, we're going to have these conversations. How do we bring them to life a little bit more in what they look like?
Can be super powerful, mate. I mean, the bit of a project I'm fortunate enough to be working on at the moment is a review of a personal risk assessment tool, which the organisation identified, well, we don't think it's doing what it's supposed to. So let's go. And they went, well, let's go talk to our workforce. So we spoke to about a quarter of the workforce, and lo and behold, it probably wasn't doing what it's supposed to do. So where we're at now is we're actually going to build that in collaboration with volunteers from the workforce. And because they've been able to build some positive momentum around their culture, they got about 10% of their workforce put their hand up and say, you know what, we want to be involved in helping build out what a good personal risk assessment tool would look like and the process attached to that. So, sitting in front of my desk right now is a bunch of bits of paper and sticky tape and staplers, and that's what I'll be doing Monday, Tuesday next week, is sitting with this group of volunteers to go, all right, well, how do we make the thing that we are supposed to use every day, is, which helps us to probably use our last line of defense, which is our brain, more effectively. How do we make it actually user-friendly? And it's a lot of vulnerability from that organization to be prepared to put itself out like that. But again, this is the start of, it's part of the process, I think, as you go through this process over and over and over again. That's a mini version within a broader transformation that they have implemented the Centre's way. They've gone, we've got an issue here. Let's understand it. Let's get aligned on the job to be done. Let's have a chat to let's prepare for the job. So like, this is a process which you can use to not only look at broader cultural transformation, but actually to solve specific issues or challenges or problems as they occur in a collaborative and consultative fashion with your workforce, with the goal of getting that sort of longer term buy-in.
Yeah. Wonderful. I love that point, and actually that, we can see the Centre's way applied to a safety transformation that rolls out over time, or we can actually apply this as just questions in a very short space of time to think about how we've set up an initiative or things like that. So it's very, very flexible. And it's always really inspiring when we do see clients taking on that integrate phase really well. We see their people using the language and the visuals, all that sort of thing. So we know that that's going to help them to succeed. And then that's not the last phase. The very last phase is evaluate. So this is where we actually take stock and consider, where have we come from? Where are we now? And where's our next step going to be? So it's all in that theme of continual improvement. So Ben, what does this look like when this is done well, this step?
Yeah, in the evaluation phase, this is really about having what's the scoreboard that we're looking at that tells us whether we're ahead or behind of where we want to be. And as part of this, it's recognizing that sometimes you are going to be ahead, sometimes you are going to be behind in different areas. Now, often I talk to where organizations sometimes get this wrong, is they'll look at the data, they'll build out their strategy, they're prepared, they've implemented, they've done, the integration part, fairly well. And then they'll look at, okay, what do we want to do to sort of post-assess how we're going? The challenge with that is it can add value, but it can be quite an extensive process and often can be quite late in terms of providing feedback on how you're actually going. A better approach, and I use the example of the organisation and their data that we shared just a little bit earlier on before, they've assessed their culture, really probably every 6 months. What you're looking at is every 12 months worth of data, but around about every 6 months, and looking at what does it look like to capture data on a regular basis. And that's not going through the full kit and caboodle of a diagnostic process, but actually look out of our strategy. We're targeting these two things specifically. So in 6 months' time, we're going to assess just those two things. That's what we've been putting the work into. So let's just assess those two things. Okay, out of that, then we've assessed and we've changed our plan. Okay, then we go out the next 6 months, and then we're going to assess those next two things as well. One organisation that I've seen do it really, really well, and this actually comes from an organisation actually in the ag space, is they built their strategy and recognised a few things that they wanted to go and target. Now, what they've done is, in essence, a pulse survey where there's two things that they target. Now, one thing is reflecting on what they've done in the last 6 months and measuring how that's gone. And then the other module is also looking at what's the thing they have recognised they want to target in the next 6 months. And then they go about that 6 months. And then they do another pulse survey, and then they're doing module to reflect on the previous 6 months and the other module to reflect on the next. So they're getting that pre and post data on a rolling basis and looking at what they need to do just to tweak and adjust their strategy. And then, different points along that journey, doing a full diagnostic to go, hey, are we still heading, more globally on the right path in terms of what we want to achieve as well. This is not about evaluate. Often organizations have got a fair, I think particularly these days, have got a fair degree of data at their disposal. It's really looking at what are the things that we want to achieve for the strategy phase, and then what's the data that we've got that's going to tell us how we're tracking with those things, or what's the data that we need to go and gather to tell us how we're tracking with those things. and are looking at those data points on a regular basis as well. The other part is with this evaluate phase is, cultural change is a complex journey. And again, I use that word deliberately. It's a journey. It's not a destination. So there's going to be ebbs and flows along that journey. And for organizations, recognizing that it's, if the data changes in a particular direction, and perhaps that direction might not be where you expected it to go, is not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Is actually looking at, well, okay, why has that changed in that particular direction? It might have gone from a 6.3 to a 6.1. It's still a positive result. Let's look at other data points to help tell a story around that particular data point and make sense of it just as much as well. And really what that evaluate phase is having continual conversation around how are things tracking along that journey, and where do we need to pivot or tweak, put greater focus, put less focus, and keep that end vision in mind as well.
It gives people the feedback of how they're going too. Justin's actually got a comment here. One way that helps to stop slipping back is talking to the facts and reconfirm the actual changes occurred, so they can see the benefit they get when they follow the new way or process. I think that's fantastic. So this model we can see, and thank you to both of you for sharing those insights, and we might try and get to a couple of questions before we finish up. But we can see that this is our evidence-based recipe for change. We can use it throughout a change project, but you can also use it as a series of questions to enable you to prepare to implement a change well. So, whether you're initiating a new safety culture transformation or strengthening existing practices, this process guides you through each phase, ensuring that change is not only effective in the short term, but it's going to be sustainable over the long term. So if you go to the next slide, and I would actually love to invite people into our positive safety community. There's some great challenges and also some things people have shared in the chat here that's really working for their organizations. I'm going to be taking these conversations back into our positive safety community. So if you haven't joined yet, please do. There's a QR code there that you can scan, which will give you access. It's a free platform. We have lots of these discussions, meetups on the back of these webinars. And I'm also going to be running a effective pre-starts and toolbox talks session at the end of this month on the 27th. We only have 3 spaces remaining actually. So if you are interested in doing that, then you'll need to jump on that quickly. So I would love to have some more of these conversations in our community space. And Ben, can you tell us about the our new safety benchmark express?
Yeah, so a little bit to that point that we just spoke to there, actually, V, is that being able to track and get that data, and the data is really important. Otherwise, we're just going off a few opinions. So being able to collect that data on a regular basis is really, really critical. So one of the things that we are looking at and are very, 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 very soon able to be deployed in organizations is our positive safety benchmark express. So in essence, to be able to conduct that survey in a very short period of time, quick access to the results, all at your disposal, a really easy platform to get those key insights, certainly at an affordable price, and put all the power of that data in your hands as well. So that's going to be something becoming very, very soon for organizations to be able to benchmark their positive safety journey on a very, very regular basis as well. So excited to we've already got some interest from quite a few organizations around that. So excited to see that interest from recognizing that a full diagnostic process can be a big, robust process. This provides a way to get that gauge on a more regular basis.
Mm.
Excellent. And then look, finally, as any other questions come through, jump online, grab your special offer for the Positive Safety book. If you want to dig more into some of the tools and ideas that we shared today, a number of the organisations we mentioned today are featured within that book, and they talk about their example, their experiences and their stories through that publication. So jump on, grab a copy, yeah, hopefully it's a useful tool. So, Corinne or Morgs, have we had any questions come through?
There is a great question here from Dee. She says, I understand that a culture shift can be an involved and lengthy process. The example you shared showed data over 4 years. How do you keep the momentum and excitement going over a long period and avoid change fatigue? Change fatigue is real, right? And documentation fatigue, someone mentioned too. So how do we keep the momentum and the excitement going over a long period?
Yeah, look, I think commitment at the executive level is key, and if you've got a board commitment at the board level, certainly helps. And bringing in, looking at culture data as one of your lead indicators and your operating rhythms certainly helps to keep us all to account. Yeah, organisations that have committed in the long term, often what they've done really well is they haven't tried to do too much too fast. And one of the experiences I know that, Ben, you've had, and certainly I've had on a number of occasions, is you'll get the diagnostic results back and there'll be a real desire to try and do, 8 or 10 items in the first quarter, and every quarter after that, it's heaps and heaps and heaps of activity. Our encouragement is to actually really ratchet that back, 1, 2, or 3 activities, and focusing in and zeroing in on the things that we think, based on the data that we've got, are going to best move the dial is important. And then as you move the dial and as you implement those things, and I think this might have been mentioned by someone on the chat, actually taking some time to pause and celebrate the success. Go, hey, we heard what you were going to say. We heard what you folks said as an organisation. We committed to doing a thing. And guess what? We did it. And you're telling us that you're having that positive experience on the back end of it. So like shouting that from the rooftop and actually saying, well, we heard you, we did something, we said we'd do something, and we did something, becomes actually a really important part of the change process and builds trust. So not doing too much too quickly, having some performance metrics in place, and being really clear that, to Ben's point, it's not a destination, it's a journey, and culture isn't a static concept. And as soon as we take our eye off on it and we don't deliberately invest in it, we're just going to get whatever culture we get.
Yep. In the last couple of minutes, Ben, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think an answer to touch on this is celebrating the wins along the journey as well. So, and whether that's with data, whether that's just celebrating the wins and the progress, that to give people. And we're really poor at recognizing slow change, or those changes that might be, really closely related to us. So, being able to recognize and celebrate those wins that, it might be sort of, 2 steps forward there, but 2 steps back there. Still celebrate the 2 steps forward. If you've ever played a game of sport and not had the scoreboard available, it's it can be a bit of a frustrating. Well, it depends on your competitiveness, I guess, but a bit of a frustrating experience. Or if you've gone for a ride or a run and not had that data, just sort of see how you're tracking, maintaining that motivation is just that little bit harder as well. The other part is around, and this is a little bit to the story of the vision, is that it's an evolving journey. So not calling it a change, not calling it a project, it's an evolving journey. Culture change a little bit is like, nurturing a plant in many ways. That at times it sort of needs more attention here or more attention there, or sort of a step back there as you're continually doing it. It's not we're going to go on this change journey and then it's a set and forget, and then we'll revisit if it pops later on. You're continually monitoring and evolving the space as well. So being mindful of that language to avoid people going, here we go again, is really critical.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. We've got some great comments there. Looks like many of you found this really valuable. So from Ant and Ben and I, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before we dial off, a couple of bits of reading for anyone who wants to dig deeper into this topic. Obviously, Leading a Positive Safety Culture, must read, plug. But other books that I found really useful to think about this from a psychology angle, as I mentioned, Nudge and Atomic Habits, some really interesting things to think about with that sustained change. And with the scoreboard piece and measuring and tracking change, the 4 disciplines of execution, A bit of can be a bit dry, but yeah, some really interesting nuggets in that one to take away as well. So I encourage any of those of you who are interested in extra reading or homework, go and have a look at those publications. Thanks, V, and thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
folks.
Take care.
Bye for now.
Cheers.